Okay, so guys, this is the second lecture for Western Civ 1 for September 8th. So you've listened to the first lecture, you filled in your worksheet, and now this is the second lecture. First lecture I talked about those 5 cradles of civilization. Cradles of civilization. The first one we talked about, the oldest human civilization, is the civilization of Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, mostly modern-day Iraq. Second, Egypt, the Nile River Valley. Those are both going before not long after 5,000 years ago in the full sense of civilization. I'll have to talk later about what that means. We also talked about the Indus River civilization in northwest India, modern-day Pakistan, and the civilization of ancient China in the river valleys of the Wang and the Chang rivers in northern China. So that's 4 of the cradles of civilization. The 5th is actually in the New World, in Central America, southern Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. And those countries housed the Maya civilization, which was a little after 500 BC is when it gets all the qualities of civilization. So 5 places around the world, civilization seems to have emerged in its fullness without relying on importation of ideas from other places. All right. So what was human life like before civilization? Okay. So our ancestors before civilization were what are often called hunter-gatherers. Hunter-gatherers. And that's because they got their food, they made their living, they survived by hunting animals or gathering edible things from the natural environment, from plants. So they didn't farm yet. There was 0 farming before about the year 12,000, but 12,000 years ago. About 10,000 BC is when the first farming began on Earth. Before that, everybody who was around was a hunter-gatherer. And these people would not be able to stay put in one place. The animals you hunt, they move, right? Animals, by their very nature, can move around, and they do move around. Or if they don't move much and you hunted them, you might very well hunt them to extinction there. So you don't want to keep exploiting a food resource that's in one place and doesn't move to where you eat it all up and there's no more left, right? So hunter-gatherers are on the move constantly throughout the year. This is called transhumance, T-R-A-N-S. Trans means across. Humus, H-U-M-U-S, means soil. So transhumance is moving across the different soils, moving from place to place. Because each microenvironment has different plants, right? You know this. You go to Big Bend, you see different kinds of plants than you'd see in the big thicket forest in East Texas or down at Galveston on the Gulf Coast or in Colorado or something. You're going to see different plants to exploit for your food in different places. And at different times of the year, different food resources are available in different places. So at one point of the year, they want to be in this place to get the berries that are on the plants there. Another part of the year, they're going to be in another place to get the roots from the tuber plants that they can eat, kind of like raw potatoes and natural potatoes or something. They're going to move around to get those different plants in different places over the course of the year. And the animals they hunt often are migratory. They move over the course of the year. So hunter-gatherers have to pack up and move. And they often do this many times a year. Think about the Native Americans of the Great Plains of the United States. I know you've all seen movies with Native people living in teepees and following the buffalo. Those are hunter-gatherers. They are not farmers. They don't have domesticated animals like our sheep and goats and pigs and cows. They eat natural animals and they eat natural foods that they gather off the wild plants. Now, all hunter-gatherer communities are small by necessity. There have been a few in very rich places, that like the Native Americans of the Northwest United States in pre-modern times, we know that they had fairly large villages because it was such a rich place. The salmon in the rivers that they could catch, the coniferous forest there. Pine cones actually have a lot of edible stuff in them. So those are very rare places. You get a lot of hunter-gatherers to live together. But most places on Earth that doesn't work that way. There aren't enough deer or antelope to hunt. There aren't enough tubers to dig out of the ground. So populations in hunter-gatherer bands are usually quite small. It's not uncommon in modern hunter-gatherer groups that anthropologists have studied for them to be 30 people tops in a band. So very small groups of people who pack up and move all the time. Again, the natives of the Great Plains could hunt those enormous herds of buffalo, so they could sometimes be fairly large, hundreds of people together, but those are rare in the history of the world. Most hunter-gatherers live in very small groups, and they pack up and move all the time. And that's how everybody on Earth lived until about 12,000 years ago. And then you have the birth of agriculture. You know what that is? That's farming. Agriculture is where I take some seed, I intentionally put them in the ground, I take some degree of care of the plant as it grows up, it reaches its mature state when it's best for me for food, I harvest whatever the crop is, I eat some of it, I live off that usually for a year or 6 months or some long time, I store some of the seed away to plant again for next year. And I do that year after year after year in the same place, right? That's what farming is, a field that I plant every year or maybe twice a year, depending on the crop and the place. I live off the food I grow myself intentionally on the farm. I plant some of the seed that I grow to come up again next year, right? That's farming. Farming was invented roughly 12,000 years ago. This is what is known as domestication. Domos is Latin. It means home. It's making a plant or an animal. Domestication is making a plant or an animal homey. It means fitting it for human use. Breeding the animal, breeding the plant to serve human needs for food, or in the case maybe of a sheep or a goat for its hair to make wool, for our clothing, or for milk cows to milk them, or goats to milk them and make cheese and dairy products out of their milk. Those things, when people modify a plant or an animal for human use, to make it better for human use, that's called domestication. And the very first domestication of plants happened in or near Mesopotamia about 12,000 years ago. This is what is known as the Neolithic Revolution. Neolithic. Neolithic. That means New Stone Age. Neolithic Revolution. The revolution of the New Stone Age. Now, what does that tell me? First off, it tells me that the tools those people had, the most advanced tools they had 12,000 years ago, were stone tools. Now, they were pretty good stone tools, guys. These were like scythes they created with sharp flint edges glued into a stick that they had carved to be able to chop the wheat down there growing. These were not crude caveman stone tools. These were advanced stone tools. All Native Americans in North America were in the Neolithic stage when Europeans got here in the 15th and 16th centuries AD, right? So, the natives of those fine bow and arrows you've seen, those are Neolithic tools. That was the best tools on Earth 12,000 years ago. Nobody had metal tools yet 12,000 years ago. But they did come up with domesticated plants in Mesopotamia, actually in the Zagros Mountains, just north of Mesopotamia. Now, how did this happen? Well, it happened when hunter-gatherers were just doing their normal thing. They were gathering grass seeds to turn into I guess we'd call it like pita bread or something. They were natural grasses, tall grass plants. You've seen like Johnson grass or something that gets those seeds on it. It's a natural grass, and we use it for animal feed even today. But they were harvesting these seeds themselves to take back to their base camp and pound those seeds and create little cakes out of them. And so they're bending over and they're snatching these seeds and putting them in a little bag or something. Well, think about it. If you're bending over to grab grass seeds, which ones are you most likely to grab? The tall ones or the short ones? The tall ones. Which ones are you likely to grab? The ones that have lots of seeds on a stalk or just one or two seeds on a stalk? You're going to grab the ones with lots of seeds. So just by human nature, if I'm bending over and gathering natural grass seeds off of natural grasses, my sack is going to wind up full of seeds from plants that are taller and have more seeds on a stalk than some of the others would, right? I carry those seeds back to my camp and I make my little cakes. But some of those seeds are going to fall on the ground, right? They're not being scientifically careful with their seeds. They're scattering seeds around their base camp as they make their cakes, and they're falling in the ground. But remember, these are seeds from plants that were taller and had more seeds on each stalk than some of the other grass seeds. You do this in the same place when you come back every fall, year after year. Your base camp is going to grow up a lot of tall grass plants with lots of seeds on them, right? You know genetics. Those seeds are going to produce other plants like themselves, taller with more seeds, and they're right at base camp. So these guys come back next year to this camp. They come back every fall, and they say, wow, look where we live. There's lots of great grass right here, tall grass with lots of seeds. And they harvest the stuff that's easiest to get, the tall, and this happens year after year. And the plants around the base camp start getting taller and taller and more seeds. Why walk a long way to have to pick out a few good plants from a whole bunch of short ones when they're all right here? And then some genius says, hold on a minute. What if we take these tall grass seeds and put them in the dirt on purpose ourselves? They'll grow up to be nice tall plants next year when we come back. He's halfway to being a farmer, right? And after people start intentionally doing this for just a few hundred years, they have developed wheat. Emmer wheat was the first domesticated plant. It was in Mesopotamia about 12,000 years ago. I-M-M-E-R, emmer wheat. And it was just natural grass that people had selected, taller and taller stalks with more and more seeds on them, and intentionally planting them in the ground and harvesting them. And these plants produce so much seed, people started surviving longer and more healthily. They are better fed. The children don't die young as often anymore. The population starts to grow when they have this regular source of good emmer wheat food. Population grows, and they begin to master the techniques of growing this wheat, and they start saying, you know, we can grow enough wheat, we can put it in jars and stay here all year long. We don't have to go wandering around the world all the time every year. We'll stay right here and grow this wheat and produce enough in the growing season that we can live off of it in the period in between. That's what happens when you start getting a 30, 40, 50-fold increase. One plant producing 50 times the seed that it takes to grow a plant. I can eat 40% of that and save 60% to plant again. And pretty soon, I have an agricultural village full of people. That was the first step from moving from being hunter-gatherers to being settled agriculturalists. It had happened by about 12,000 years ago in Mesopotamia. We have archaeological evidence of settled villages there with hundreds of people by about 12,000 years ago, and they were living off emmer wheat. Now, they were still hunting animals in the surrounding regions. It takes a little longer. In the next lecture, I'll talk about the domestication of some more plants and the domestication of animals. Okay? But that's your lecture on hunter-gatherers and the beginning of the domestication of plants. Emmer wheat in Mesopotamia, the world's first domesticated plant, and the beginnings of agriculture. Thanks.